Hello, everybody. Dr. Dan Kalish here, and welcome to our Summer Mentorship Miniseries on decoding dysbiosis. This is going to be fun. We're going to try to review some labs, give you some big picture concepts, and most importantly, introduce you to the concept of having a treatment model. That's really the goal. And we are here to talk about, you can tell from the title, our mentorship class, which is starting right now this summer. So I'll introduce myself, introduce you to the mentorship call or class, and then we can look at some slides and review a few labs. If you guys have questions, type them in. I'll get to as many questions as I can at the end of the session, okay? So for those of you that are brand new, I am Dan Kalish. I've been running the Kalish Institute since 2006. We've trained thousands and thousands of practitioners with the goal of getting you all to learn how to interpret labs at the highest level of skill possible and to be able to run a successful, profitable practice and help a lot of people. That's the goal. We've worked with the Mayo Clinic. I've worked extensively with Richard Lord, who's one of the original scientists in this field, and as well as a bunch of other notable naturopaths and lab directors. And I've had the great privilege to work with IFM as well over the years and have consolidated all this information and put it into an easy to understand framework and model that you can apply to your practice right away. That's sort of my niche in our industry, getting people started in practice. And our flagship product is this mentorship class, which is starting right now, June 16th. Uh, this has been running since 2006. This is the class where you take a year of your life to really get into understanding how to interpret labs, adrenal, GI, organic acids, putting it all together in a package so you can get your practice up and running. I try to consolidate all the information, present it in a very practical and applicable way so that each day you're in this class, this mentorship class, you up-level your interpretation skills, you up-level your presentation skills so you can explain this stuff to patients, and you create a model, a clinical model, that you can use the rest of your career. And we've been very successful doing this. We and talked to many of the graduates of the program. People get a lot out of it. Why would you not want to do this? Well, somebody told me a bunch of years ago, because I was like, why doesn't everybody take this class? She's like, Dan, would you love a brand new Porsche 911? I'm like, yeah, they're like the best cars. And she said, well, why don't you buy one? Well, because they're really expensive. And she's like, well, you know, it's a little expensive, this class. Well, it's a little expensive, but if you look at the return on investment, you will pay for the entire mentorship class if you just do a workup on like 4 patients, okay? So in the scheme of your overall business, if you're actually serious about starting a practice and you're in that phase of your career where you really want to make this a go of it, you know, in terms of your business, you will return the entire cost of this course within the first 3 or 4 months of taking the class, because we want you to actually be working with patients while you're doing this session. It's not a sit around, I'm going to listen to lectures and then think about it kind of class. This is all action-oriented people who are in practice, starting their practice, making their practice more efficient and whatnot. So we're starting a new group this week or next week, I guess it is. If you're interested, you get $1,199 off. You can scan that QR code, set up a session to talk to one of my team members or to myself if you're interested in me explaining more detail about what this mentorship is all for. There's a problem in our industry right now where a lot of people don't know how to interpret labs, and we're trying to solve for that. You have to have basic lab interpretation skills. I was very fortunate early in my career to meet Dr. Timmons and Dr. Lord and to have these people in my lives on a regular basis to teach me lab interpretation. If you don't have that, that's the whole purpose of the mentorship, to have me and my faculty in your lives for a year. It's like we're down the hall. It's like in the old days when I was at Glenn's clinic, and I would like literally just stick my head of my treatment room door, knock on his door and say, hey, Glenn, what the heck do I do with this? And he'd say, and tell me, and I, okay, thanks. I go back into the room and pretend like I was doing something else, you know? We're like a virtual version of that. Myself, we have Duncan McDonald, we have Michelle Hirsch, there's 3 of us faculty, and we're just there to like tell you, okay, tomorrow morning when you see this patient, here's what you tell them, all right? It's gonna work, don't worry, we've done it, you got this, you know? Anyways, that's what we're here for. Okay, so let's get into the subject for today. This is dysbiosis we're talking about. Dysbiosis. So I'm going to talk about dysbiosis, what it is, and then the fun part of this is to look at the labs. But I'm going to go through some slides just to give you a framework if this is all new to you. And there's different types of dysbiosis. There's you don't have the best diversity dysbiosis. That means that your gut microbes, the good ones, are just messed up. You don't have the right ones, you don't have enough of the right ones, and they don't have this variety of gut microbes that you need. Why? Because we all eat really poor quality food and we're stressed out of our minds, and these things end up impacting your microbiome. You can also have an overgrowth type of dysbiosis. That means there's too much of something overgrowing. Some opportunistic organism has decided that you're going to be a target, and because your immune response is weak and your microbiome is weak, these organisms will overgrow. Yeast organisms, bacterial organisms, in general, we call this dysbiosis also. You can also have a pathogen, a pathogenic version of this. Now, this is when you've actually got an infection and it's a much bigger, lengthier solution to deal with. There are all kinds of stool test markers for dysbiosis. We're going to look at a couple of different labs in a few minutes so you can see the real labs and how this plays out. But you want to be able to think of it in sections. So you can look at commensal imbalances, you can look at pathogens, you can look for short chain fatty acid levels and secretory IgA, you can look at beta-glucuronidase even. There's all kinds of different markers. There's probably, like on a typical stool test, literally I was going to say a couple dozen, but more than that, because there's individual bacteria. There's got to be like 40 to 80 different markers on a given test, depending which lab company you're using, that are going to tell you about dysbiosis. So this is not like a big mystery. The problem is that it's confusing to try to interpret the test because there's so many markers, and it's like, how do I know what to do? How do I know what kind of oregano oil I'm going to prescribe, how much of it for how long, and what do I do if it doesn't work? Those are kind of the realistic things you need to understand. Again, like when I was working with Glenn, I, I, I remember my first year, my hand just shaking before I opened the treatment room door. There's a patient on the other side of this door, and I'm just shaking and sweating and just like, because I didn't know, I didn't have the confidence to understand what was going on. But I could just run into that other room and say, Glenn, here's what I got. What should I do? And he would say, do this, do this, do that. And then he would just give me that look, and I'm like, I got it. And I would just go in the room and say exactly what he said. That's the whole point of my mentorship training program is every week we meet live and you present your cases to me and my faculty, and we tell you, this is what the lab says, this is what you're going to tell the patient, these are the dosages you're going to use, this is a company, this is a product, it's pure encapsulations, it's metagenics, it's designs for health, it's Apex, it's whoever, and it's this many pills at this dose, and this is what you're going to tell the patient is happening. Okay, you need that kind of embrace. And then to make that work, to actually learn all this stuff in a year, you need a model. You need a model, you need a model. There's the 5R model: remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, rebalance. I was joking the other day that my whole practice for the first year was 2 R's and an S, because I would remove and replace and then stop. I don't like the 5R thing. I just don't. It's just too complicated for me. I can't remember 5 things, and I can't explain 5 things to a patient in the amount of time that is realistic. So this is popular. Everyone uses this. You can study this. You could probably just Google 5R approach and memorize this. But I don't like this at all because I like things in 3s. And I like to think of it more in a functional, applicable way that can easily match the lab test itself. So remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, and rebalance. That doesn't sync up with the lab in a way that any patient is going to be able to remember, okay? So I'm not anti-5R any more than I'm like, I don't know, anti-Volvo. I don't really want a Volvo, but I'm not against Volvos. If you have a Volvo, I wouldn't think less of you because of that. So I'm not anti-5R, but I think there's an easier way to deal with it. And I'll show you in a minute what that is. It's 3 things, right? It's microbiome, GI organs, and pathogens. And I think that 3 things is easier because it encompasses a lot more in a sense, but there's less to remember. Okay, I'll show you. You can choose. You can like the 5R thing, you can learn that too. targeted nutrients based on test results. So we're going to think about, these are the things that you need to learn how to use. And there's probably 15 or 20 different GI products that you need to master. We're not going to obviously cover them all in like an hour here, but there's a finite number. There's antimicrobials, prebiotics, probiotics, and then there's stuff that you need like for the liver, for the stomach, for the pancreas. But just so you know, it's a finite short list of total products that you need to understand how to use. And then honestly, you know, Timmons taught me this 32 years ago or something. The products are all the same. There's a few things that have come out. Okay, like there's acromantia now. That didn't used to be around. And there's butyrate. Okay, there's better forms of butyrate. But 98% of 95% of what we do now is the same as what Timmons taught me 30 years ago. It's probably similar to what some naturopath was doing like in 1658 somewhere, okay? It's the same herbs and plants and ideas. This is not like rocket science. It's not new by any means. Like time-tested natural medicine that we're applying here. So I like the 3 stages more than the 5 R's. Stage 1, microbiome disruption. Stage 2, GI organ problems. And then stage 3, ouch, you got an infection. The reason why I like this model is because it's progressive and explains how the person got into a problem and how you're going to get them out of that problem at the same time. Let me say that again. It explains why the problems occur sequentially, and it explains how you want to treat the problem in a holistic model all at the same time. And I just don't see that with the 5 R's. At least my mind can't really capture that. The 5 R's is more of a 5-step thing to fix it, but it doesn't show the patient why it happened all at the same time. So here's the way it's just, and trust me, this is just easier to explain to people too. So because of these problems up here, because you're eating ultra-processed food, maybe you have a gluten intolerance or a dairy problem, because you don't sleep that well and you're stressed out of your mind, okay? Because your relationships are not as loving as they could be. Perhaps you have some environmental toxin exposure and you're not exercising enough or exercising too much. Because of those things altogether, your microbiome is disrupted. Eventually that throws off your GI organs, and then if things go bad enough and your immune system falters bad enough, you can pick up an infection. So that's how this happens. All this stuff at the top together in different combinations starts to throw off your microbiome, which starts to throw off your GI organs, and if your immune system gets weak enough, you pick up GI infections. So then this also shows you the treatment sequence. You can either treat a stage 1 and then do 2 or 3, or you can start with a 3 and then do a 2 and a 1. You can go either way. You can treat that way or you can treat that way, depending on the patient and how aggressive you want to be. So that's another reason why I like this, because it gives you some flexibility and reality and actually how to treat people. There's no one order that's going to work all the time. In fact, if you try to remove things first, with half the patients that I have, they're just going to get sick and get mad and go away. Okay, so there's a lot of times when you got to start here with stage 1, build yourself up to treating infections as the last part. So I like this because it's more flexible. You can you got to, be on your feet a little more with these different stages. So we're going to get into the stages for a minute, and then we'll show you some treatment stuff, and then we'll look at some labs. So stage number one, microbiome disruption. A lot of it comes down to food, pro-inflammatory foods, ultra-processed foods, not good for us. But another equally important, maybe some would argue more important variable, is actually stress. You can stress yourself into a gut problem pretty easily, pretty darn easily. Your HPA axis gets thrown off, your cortisol gets all kafooey, and then all of a sudden you have a serious problem. And that serious problem can be cortisol being off, generating damage to the gut lining, because when we're stressed and we're catabolic, we break down tissues like the gut lining. Cortisol also regulates secretory IgA or SIgA, which means that if your cortisol is off, your immune response vis-a-vis secretory IgA is going to be off. So now a stressed person has poor gut immunity and a leaky gut because you're chewing up the gut lining. My favorite example of this is just because I really like Bradley Cooper. You know who Bradley Cooper is? He's ridiculously handsome, but I also think he's a really good actor. If you saw him in that movie where he plays the singer with Lady Gaga, I mean, that was a great film. A Star is Born. I mean, that was a really good movie. I don't want to spoil the end of it for you, but it's a great film. And he also was in this movie called Sniper. No, it wasn't called Sniper, American Sniper. So there's scenes in that movie where Bradley Cooper is sitting in a chair back home in Texas, but he's like the #1 rated sniper in the history of American military stuff. So he basically kills people for a living. He assassinates them by blowing their heads off with a rifle at long distance, right? But he's sitting in this room at his home watching a football game, I think, and he's just seething with anger and resentment and violence, and I think his wife comes in and says, "Hey, honey, you want a beer?" or something like that. But you can just see on his face that he is so stressed. He's like stressed to the max capacity, you know. And then they juxtapose this with him being in the war zones and whatnot. But that sitting in a chair stress, Bradley Cooper kind of stress level, that's enough to completely chew up your gut lining, destroy your HPA axis, and completely ruin your secretory IgA. Now that sets up a whole series of events, which means that your gut lining is unprotected, your immune system in your gut is compromised because of the stress. So stress is one of the bigger variables here, which means that you want to test and correct the adrenal glands as part of a gut program. That's kind of the take-home message there. The second stage is when the GI organs are involved. Now the stomach's not making enough hydrochloric acid, or the pancreas isn't making all the enzymes, or the gallbladder's not making bile. If your gallbladder's not making bile, you're gonna have an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine just because there's not enough bile. Okay. Some people would call that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I would call that like a gallbladder problem. You know, it could be SIBO, but it could also be a gallbladder problem. So you want to think that through. And if the immune system gets weak enough, then you start to pick up a pathogen. Okay. Gut immunity so weak that you pick up a pathogen. That's where we don't want to go. So let me go back here. I skipped through a few slides. Pancreas. We're gonna look at the labs. I'll show you the pancreas stuff. I'll show you the gallbladder stuff also in a second. We look at the labs, but I want to focus in on the whole idea of gut immunity and what happens when we're stressed, because this is what happens to most people we work with. They're stressed. Their GI organs aren't working right. Their small intestine, the large intestine lining isn't working right. The secretory IgA drops because they're stressed and cortisol regulates it. They get a leaky gut because they're stressed and cortisol chews up the gut lining when it's high. Okay, now you're Bradley Cooper sitting in a chair, stressed out of your mind, just heading headlong into a GI problem. And then all of a sudden you drink a glass of water and now you got cryptosporidium, you got an infection. That's the origin for most of the people that we work with in terms of where these problems come from. Okay, so dysbiosis, it's a microbial imbalance. It could be not enough different types of organisms. That's the diversity type. It could be an overgrowth of bad organisms, opportunistic organisms. That's not really an infection per se, but it's an overgrowth, you know. And then, or you could have a pathogenic shift. It could be like a pathogen that's happening and things are in really bad shape. Stool test markers, we're going to look at in a moment. You're looking for pathogens, short chain fatty acid levels, SIgA, I talked a lot about, beta-glucuronidase, we'll look at. There's dozens of ways you can assess dysbiosis. Most of the labs, all of the lab companies have like summaries for us. So if you don't want to look at like 84 markers and figure out if the person has dysbiosis or not, there's going to be a summary page that will say dysbiosis, yes or no. So you don't have to be like a microbiology PhD to figure this out. Okay, you just need to be able to look at the graph and go, oh, okay, they have dysbiosis, because somebody did an computer algorithm to summarize all this for us. Yep. And then you want to think you can use the 5R approach, and you should know this, and I was kind of making fun of it, which is a little rude of me, because I used the 5R approach for a long time, but I just like the 3-body systems more. So you could totally do the 5R. It's removing the pathogen, then replacing with the good guys. Then replacing the things that are missing. That would be like digestive enzymes and stuff. Then reinoculating, that's putting the good bacteria back in. Then repairing the gut lining, and then rebalancing the system. And let me show you this. And you're supposed to know this too. You kind of do have to know this. So here again, remove that you're identifying and eliminating the bad things, the pathogens, etc. Replacing, you're putting the good things back. That's the enzymes, the bile salts, all these things. Reinoculating, that's prebiotics and probiotics. Repairing, that's repairing the damage to the gut lining. And then rebalance is the lifestyle, okay? But I'm just going to dig into this. I'm just too deep into this now to to back down. You got to rebalance first, okay? Rebalance is last. That just doesn't work, you guys. It doesn't work at all. Why? Because of this. Like, this is what started it. Here, let me show you. Maybe this is why I don't like the 5 R's. See, this is what starts the problem. So if you're going to do a successful gut program, you have to start with the lifestyle part first. How long? At least 2 months. 2 months of a healthy diet, 2 months of stress reduction, 2 months of better sleep, 2 months of everything that you need to do to get the lifestyle cleaned up. Because that's what generates these problems. In my world, we teach this in the mentorship, then that part of that is doing the adrenal test and correcting the adrenals, as well as getting the diet sorted out. So that first 2 months of a GI program has no GI symptom, no GI treatments yet. So we're doing the 5th R first. Works much better this way. And then at the beginning of month 3, then you start with the removal thing, okay? If you start with the pathogen treatment and you haven't set the stage for the immune system to be stronger, it just doesn't work as often. You're going to be incredibly frustrated if you do it that way. So you could do the 5 R's, but they're out of order anyways. That's maybe part of why I don't like them. Never really thought that till just now, but anyways. Okay, key, yeah, don't do the rebalance last. If you're going to do the 5 R's, fine, but put the first R, the last R first. The 5th R rebalance has to happen first. You have to do it for 2 months, then you can remove. Then you can remove. So here are the clinical skills that we want to think through. Number 1 is understanding how to assess a stage 1, right? Which is, we're going to look at labs in a second. I'll go through the detail on this with you, which is microbiome problems. Stage 2 is to figure out what organs are screwed up. And then stage 3, is there a pathogen, yes or no? For those of you that came late, we are starting a new mentorship cohort June the 16th in this year of 2025. You get basically $1,200 off as a discount if you scan that QR code. What is this class? This class is weekly lab review where you submit your cases and my faculty and I review them with you in a small group setting. You also hear throughout the year an estimated 300, maybe 400, 450 different cases from all the other students that you're studying with. So you get exposure to a lot of different lab review sessions, as well as reviewing your own. And then we have this massive curriculum that I've built over the years, which helps you understand how to interpret the labs. But it's case-based learning. So the idea is that you see something in the Q&A call, and or maybe it's your own lab test that you ran on a patient, and you're like, I don't really understand beta-glucuronidase. We talk about it in class. Well, myself or Michelle or Duncan tells you exactly what to do, and then you can go listen to that beta-glucuronidase lecture and figure out why the heck you just did that. But what we don't want is for you to wait around for the next 16 years to memorize all these factoids and then start your practice. It just doesn't work. You can learn as you go in functional medicine. You really can. You can do it safely if you have a mentor. This is how all of us learned. I didn't sit around. I was in Glenn's office, Glenn Frieder's office, running tests, and he was telling me what to do. I met Dr. Timmons. I was running tests, getting the test results back, having no idea what to do at all. I'm just looking at this test. I don't know what to do. Getting on the phone with Dr. Timmons, who would tell me exactly what to do. I would always tell patients, oh no, your labs haven't come in yet. I lied, basically. My front desk did. They would say, oh no, your labs aren't in yet. They'll be here next week, because I needed an extra week to review everything with Timmons. It worked, so everybody had to wait an extra week. But by the time I reviewed the lab with Timmons, then I had total confidence to walk into the treatment room and explain to that patient exactly what was going on. And I would do exactly what Dr. Timmons said, to the milligram of everything. And it always went about like he said it would. Was it perfect? No, but it was a great practice. And I learned a lot in that method of testing, getting a mentorship session, applying it to that patient in real time. It's a great way to learn the work. You'll learn it incredibly quickly. That's why at the end of the year of the mentorship, people are so good, because they've done they've done their own cases and they've heard hundreds of other cases already, roll through the live Q&A calls. It's an intensive way of learning it, but people don't find it stressful. It's not stressful. We have a whole group that's exiting now that just finished their year. I'm talking to all the graduates in the last few weeks. They're not stressed out. They're kind of happy that it's not a hard, stressful slog to get through. It's kind of fun if you do it right, in terms of learning how to do the work. And we're not trying to get you to memorize anything. We're trying to get you to learn things. That's the goal. All right, stage 1, what you're looking for in the lab. The microbiome is disturbed. This is a giveaway, low short chain fatty acids. Why? Because it's the good bacteria that make short chain fatty acids. And then obviously the commensal bacterial markers themselves. But we'll look at labs and I'll show you how to find that. So that's stage 1. You got a problem with the microbiome itself. And there's a bunch of different solutions. You can use butyrate, you can use prebiotics, probiotics. It's a bunch of different potential solutions you can use to get the good bacteria back. But really, a lot of this comes down to fiber and polyphenols from your diet. Now, there's also in each one of these different lab companies that we use, the commensal microbiota assessment section. And they're going to show you what's happening with the good organisms or the commensals and what's happening with the dysbiotic or opportunistic ones. So again, you can have a series of problems. You're entitled to more than one problem at the same time. You could have a lack of commensals with or without dysbiosis. You could have a lack of commensals with an overgrowth of harmful ones. That would make sense, right? Because that would kind of match up. You can even have, this is not so common, but you can have a really good commensal population, but also have dysbiosis. And you're going to see that right on the labs. And then you treat what you find, right? If the commensals are low, you want to do the specific things you need to bring the commensals back up. That's your prebiotics and probiotics, fiber, polyphenols, butyrate, if the commensals are low. If there's dysbiosis, bad organisms, bad actors overgrowing, you want to kill them. You want to kill them and you want to strengthen the immune response. Okay? Pretty straightforward. The second stage, after the microbiome disruption, what happens next? Then the organs start to get impacted. What do you want to see on the labs? Inadequate HCl production. That's going to be markers that are related to protein digestion. Inadequate enzymes, that's the bile-related markers, either gallbladder-related markers or pancreatic enzyme-related markers. Okay. Either one. Leaky gut, and then degradation of the immune response. We talked a lot about secretory IgA. So you could have not enough stomach acid. You'll see that on the labs. You could have either a gallbladder or a pancreatic enzyme output problem, or both. You'll see that on the labs. They're separate, but kind of related, obviously. And then you could have either leaky gut or a gut immune response. So what's leaky gut? That's damage to the gut lining that kind of implies that there's inflammation and tissue damage that's chewed up or damaged the gut lining. But it could be stress mediated. It could be our Bradley Cooper example, where you're a sniper and you're at home and it's just kind of hard to cope with your normal life when you know you're going back out there in a couple weeks to kill people again, because you did like, I don't know, you did like 6 tours or whatever it was. You kept going back to Iraq and killing people. So, high stress can trigger it. Or it could be inflammatory foods. Lots of different things could cause the leaky gut. And then the immune response in the gut lining, now we're back to SIgA, we're back to inflammation and tissue damage, and cortisol again helping to regulate that. That's why we want to do the lifestyle treatments first, because we want to get the immune response stronger. We want to reduce the level of leaky gut, because then when you go in to kill the pathogens, you're much more likely to get a result. Okay. The third stage, stage 1 is microbiome, stage 2 is GI organs. The third stage is GI pathogens. Now things are so messed up that you've actually got an infection that you need to get rid of. Okay, and don't want to go there, but we see that a lot. That's actually like a picture of Cryptosporidium. I don't know, it looks a little sinister to me. I don't know why. Maybe it's the way it's colored or something, but it doesn't look very friendly. If you've ever seen a picture of Giardia, it doesn't look very nice either. But this is where people end up. They end up with an infection, and we're trying to prevent this from happening. Or if they do have an infection, figure out how to deal with it and treat it. Okay, so we've already talked about this a million times. There's your QR code. We'll be emailing those QR codes out also. So let's take a pause for a moment here and look at labs. So now, with that just kind of as a background, let's take a peek at some lab tests and see what we can make of all this stuff. There's a couple different, and there's lots of different companies out there. You know, I work with them all, and they're all good. They're not all good, but I'll tell you the ones that are good. So Diagnostic Solutions is good, Genova is good, Vibrant is good, Doctor's Data is good. There are, I guess, some other ones out there, but those are the main ones. Okay, let me list that again. So Doctor's Data, they have a GI 360. Diagnostic Solutions, we're about to look at here, they have a GI map. Vibrant has a famous one called the Gut Zoomer. And then Genova has the GI effects. Those are the 4 lab companies that you can trust. If you ask me which one's better, I don't think it really matters. You can really get tests from any of them. It depends somewhat on format and if you prefer one company over the other or whatever. All right, so now we're going to look at these 3 different variables. We're going to look at a couple of different types of tests from different companies and then try to assess, is there a microbiome problem? Is there an organ problem? And is there a pathogen? But let's start off looking for dysbiosis since that's the theme. So this particular lab company has a section that's called opportunistic overgrowth microbes, opportunistic or overgrowing microbes. And right here, you can see it says dysbiosis or dysbiotic and overgrowth bacteria. So these are the dysbiotic bacteria. So if you see a whole bunch of red highs, you know the person has dysbiosis. And sometimes there's one marker that's positive. Sometimes there's like 5 or 10 markers that are positive. It does seem to me from looking at thousands of these labs and every day hearing patients, not patients, students submit these labs and what's going on, that the more of these markers that are positive in general, the less healthy the person is. That seems to be pretty true. So this person has like 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. That's not great, but it could be worse. You have one of them, that's not that bad, in the scheme of what we often see. But this one would be, a decent level of dysbiosis, like something that's problematic enough that you're going to have to deal with it in some way, and by treating it. So that's the dysbiosis markers. So now let's think about the microbiome markers. Let's just look at those next on this particular lab. And some would argue this is the most important section. So these are the commensal bacteria. These are the good ones. And you want there to be a diversity of these organisms, as we were saying, like low diversity is bad. And you want there to be like a robust growth of them. This one's not too bad. Sometimes you'll see these labs when most of these markers are low. We got some dysbiosis here. And then for the second stage where you're looking for organ problems, let me just list these out so you can see how easy this can be. So steatocrit is an indicator for gallbladder, elastase for pancreatic enzymes. We already talked about beta-glucuronidase. So that's a dysbiosis indicator. It indicates that there's some bad acting bacteria that are overgrowing, which can, in some cases, trigger estrogen dominance and estrogen reabsorption, believe it or not. It's kind of a liver estrogen related problem. Here's our SIgA. You can think of Bradley Cooper every time you see SIgA. Low SIgA is a problem. SIgA is regulated by stress hormones like cortisol. And then here are some inflammatory markers, leaky gut marker called zonulin. So these are all giving you the general status of the GI organs. Are they inflamed? There's like 5 or 6 things, right? Is your stomach making enough stomach acid? This lab company doesn't have a marker for that. Is your gallbladder working right? Is your pancreas working right? What's happening with your immune response in the gut? And what's happening with inflammation in the gut? That's enough. If you just get that figured out, that's enough. And then the final issue is, are there any infections? So you can look at parasites, and I think in this case there was a bacterial overgrowth with C. diff. Yeah. Okay. So now, if you have a little bit of C. diff like that, just toxin A positive and some dysbiosis, then what do you do about that? Well, let's lay out a program, and I'll do a quick program design here. Now, if you guys were in the mentorship, you'd be doing this all day long with your own cases and actually learning how to do this in real time. It's a lot of pressure that's involved in doing this in real time, but I think that pressure is good because it forces people to learn. When people learn under pressure a lot more quickly than they learn just when they're sitting around thinking about things. Like if you're sitting at a lecture, somebody said this the other day to me, he's kind of famous functional medicine doctor. He's like, no, Dan, there's no way I could just sit in a lecture hall waiting for someone to say something that's clinically relevant and then write it down. He's like, I want to learn in real time with real people so I mean, it's just faster. Okay, so number one, as we design this program, for some reason this isn't displaying very well. Hang on a second. There, is that better? Not really. Hang on a sec. Not sure why. The screen is kind of screwed up. There we go. Okay. So number one we want to do here is lifestyle, right? So it's lifestyle the first 2 months. And in my world, that's an adrenal test and program, diet changes, all the diet stuff you need to do, and stress reduction. That's the first 2 months. Then we can go after the GI bugs. And in this case, we have C. diff, just toxin A, so you can do that naturally without a prescription. We had some dysbiosis. And let's just pretend there was a gallbladder problem. So now we're 2 months into the program now. Now we're going to go after the dysbiosis first. So you can use something like grapefruit seed extract. 2 of those. I just did one of these for a patient a few hours ago. Oregano oil extract. That stuff works really well. 2 of those. And then some gallbladder support. I like the LVGB from Designs for Health, but every company has one. LVGB is Designs for Health. That's my favorite, but that's just because I like that company. Every company has one of those, okay? And how long do you do this for? You know, usually 2 months. Anti-dysbiosis program. Generally, you don't use antibiotics for dysbiosis because that would make the problem worse. But before you start with that dysbiosis program, you would engage in the lifestyle changes first. That's an important thing. All right, and I'm glad we worked through my emotional issues with the 5 R's because now I realize why they put the last R has to happen first, or you're not going to be as successful as you could be otherwise. All right, let's take a look at a different lab. Here is a GI effects from Genova. So same. On this one, it's even easier because you just look at the home page here, and they have a section called dysbiosis, and they rate it from a 0 to 10. 10 is bad. 10 is like extra bad, 10 is as bad as it can get. So again, right off the bat, you don't have to analyze anything. You just see that there's a problem there. And then if you the way that I would break this down with my system, so my system is the microbiome, GI organs, and then infections. So for the microbiome, let's start with that. You would want to look at, here we go, short chain fatty acids. Remember, if those are off, then you know that there's a microbiome imbalance. And then this is a little confusing. On this lab, you have to scoot down a little bit on this lab report because they have the graphic down here. There's the inflammation thing. We're going to here we go. Commensal balance. So this would be the markers for the microbiome. So this one's in the green, so it's good. But most often you're going to see that there's a mark, the marker's in the red somewhere here, which means that there's an imbalance with the good and bad bacteria. And the good bacteria are having trouble, right? So you can have dysbiosis with or without commensal bacterial problems. In this case, there's dysbiosis, but the commensal bacteria are okay. Very often you're going to see dysbiosis and these commensal bacteria are going to be problematic. There's going to be a problem there. This one happens to be the other, not that. Let's see. And then even without scanning all the details here, I can just show you. Hang on a second. On the summary page, so the microbiome was okay in this case, but there's a lot of dysbiosis, yeast overgrowth, etc. So we know there's a problem. And then here, fecal fat, that's obviously gallbladder related. Pancreatic elastase, that's obviously pancreatic enzyme related. And then products of protein breakdown, that's code word for stomach acid. So there's your gallbladder marker, pancreatic enzyme marker, and stomach marker for the organs. The other organs would be related to inflammation in the intestinal tract and the immune response. And here's your SIgA is high, so there's a problem with the immune response, and there's not a lot of inflammation. So remember, it's stomach acid production, pancreatic enzyme production problems, gallbladder, not enough bile. Some combination of those can cause small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because if you don't kill the bacteria in your stomach with hydrochloric acid and you don't have enough bile in your system, the small intestinal bacteria are going to proliferate. And then in the intestinal tract, we're looking at the immune response and the inflammatory response. And this person has the immune response problem, that's your SIgA, but not the inflammatory problem. Could have both. And they have really bad dysbiosis, and there's some other infection, well, there's some infections going on too. So dysbiosis is an opportunistic overgrowth, but infection is infection. So let's kind of hunt around and see. Now you got to scoot down and look at the infection section. Infection section, that's kind of hard to say. And this is a long report. You got to go way down here and like I'm keeping going. And where is this? Ah, finally. Okay, now where are we? Let's get oriented. We're in the infection section, parasitology. You see that? And we've just looking all day to find this because there's so many markers on here. And there it is. They have Giardia. I've had patients come in who have Giardia or Blasto on this lab in red letters who saw another doctor and they missed it. And the doctor missed it. So just read the lab carefully. Don't like skip over stuff. Giardia means Giardia. That's an infection. Few detected, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there's one Giardia or a billion of them. You have Giardia. It's an infection of Giardia. It's hard to find these bugs. So now we know that the person has a Giardia infection. And let's see, what else? Let's just go back up so we can design one more program. Then we'll go to questions. So dysbiosis is at a 10. There's a gallbladder problem, and they have Giardia. Oh, okay. Think we can handle that? Probably. And by the way, for those of you that sign up for the mentorship program, we have protocols for all this stuff written out. There's parasite protocol, there's gallbladder protocol. It's all protocol driven, so you can just learn the protocols. That's what you're paying for in the class, is to learn these protocols. So now we have Giardia. So you have the option of treating Giardia with herbs or antibiotics. Let's just, to make it interesting, say you do the antibiotics. Do you treat the Giardia on day one? No, you don't. You do 2 months of the last R, right? You do the last R first. So adrenal test and fixing the adrenals, cleaning up the diet, stress management. Then in the beginning of month 3, so month 3, treat Giardia. Why do we wait so long? Because we want to strengthen the immune response, reduce the inflammation, get the gut lining to be healthier, and then kill the bug. Much more likely to get it if you wait. But when you do, when you are ready to go after it, okay, then you would do the antibiotics in this case, and then you would do a follow-up dysbiosis program after the treatment for the Giardia is done. And then treat dysbiosis. And there's a priority here. If there's a parasite in dysbiosis, I would always do the parasite first. No question about that. Okay, so get rid of the Giardia, then you treat the dysbiosis. Well, in fact, it's the same dysbiosis one I just had here. You don't even have to change that. Except for this patient had what? Oh, they had a gallbladder problem. Oh yeah, so we have the gallbladder there. If you want to mix it up a little bit, you want a different product, there's Digestion GB from Pure. That's a really great one too for gallbladder support. So now we're doing our gallbladder support, killing the dysbiosis after we've treated the giardia, which is happening 2 months or 3 months into the program after we've made the lifestyle changes. That's the way to do it. Okay, mentorship is starting in a week. If you're interested in a year of learning how to interpret labs, at the end of the year, being an expert at organic acids, GI testing, adrenal hormones, female hormones, incorporating all three of these different types of labs for all of these different body systems together into comprehensive programs for patients, and just drilling on that every week until you got it down, then join the class and you get like $1,200 off just with a QR code. Let's make it easy for you all, okay? It's a great group of people too. It's fun. I wish, the thing I wish is that you could all just sit in on a session, because it's like really great practitioners. We have RDs, MDs, DOs, PAs, NPs, lots of acupuncturists, bunch of chiropractors, a few naturopaths, but not that many. It's just a wide mix of practitioners, all sharing this goal of figuring out how to help people using functional medicine. And then we have this like almost 20-year history. Next year is going to be the 20th year I've been doing this. So it's like a rich generational history of my teachers going back to the 60s and 70s. I learned this work in the 1990s. I'm passing it on with my faculty to the next generation. It's a really great group, and it's a really strong community, and it's a lot of peer-to-peer learning. You're learning from your other folks as everyone's submitting labs. It's got a good vibe to it. People, it's a life-changing experience for people. It's really amazing for me to see. At the end of the year, like I'm doing the exit interviews now, like I said, and at the end of the year, people are different. They're different. They're better. They're not better people, but they're like it's a shift. It's a shift in awareness of what you can do with functional medicine. It's a pretty big shift for people. That's kind of what we're in the game for, all right? Okay, so now questions. So can you translate? So yeah, we've had people from Japan take the class, France, Germany, Saudi, Egypt, Pakistan, India. So we're okay with different languages. There's ways that you can do, Google Translate and whatnot if you need to have the course translated into a different language for you. But we have a lot of international students. Let's see here. Yes, and as I mentioned a second ago, it's another question. You can, if you're a nurse practitioner, we love nurse practitioners. We have a lot of them take the class, so you definitely take it. And we mix everybody together. So there's medical doctors, nurse practitioners, chiropractors, acupuncturists. Everybody is in the same group, kind of learning from each other. And that part of it, I think, is part of what makes the experience really rich. But everybody's learning to interpret labs. So that is, the absolute commonality here. Let's see. Um, uh, Oh, for the order. So if patients have infections, parasites, overgrowth, pathogens, all these things together, in what order do you do this? So you start for the first 2 months with lifestyle and adrenals. At the beginning of month 3, go after the pathogens aggressively, antibiotics, herbs, however you're going to do that. And then, assuming it's going well, you do any kind of liver detoxification, liver support towards the end of the program. Okay, that's assuming it's going well. So neuroendocrine first, that's adrenals, thyroid, mitochondria, brain, neuroendocrine first. A couple months in, you go after the GI pathogens if they're present. And then as soon as the GI is calming down, you go after liver clearance, liver detoxification, getting the mold out, getting the heavy metals out, all that kind of stuff. So that's the general sequence. Don't start with mold, for goodness sakes. It's bad enough that people start with GI. If you start with mold, that's just so messed up for the patient. See, imagine if you were full of mold, your body was full of mold, and someone came along and said, "Oh, you have mold. I'm going to get rid of the mold like today." No, you can't do that. You have to. The reason they have mold is because their body's screwed up. So you got to get the screwed up part of the body fixed first. You got to get the detox pathways working. You got to get the gut working. You got to get the adrenals working, the brain working. You have to get the mitochondria working. You got to get all that stuff working. Then you can deal with the mold. Many times in functional medicine, we find the most important thing is mold. The most important thing is heavy metals. Doesn't mean you do that first. You don't do the most important thing first. You got to set the body up. You got to look at it from a body systems perspective and set the body up so that you're getting the person ready for the most important treatment, not doing the most important treatment first. That is a big mistake that almost everybody makes. Almost everybody makes that mistake. Why don't I make that mistake? Because my first and second teachers, Michael Leibowitz and Dr. Bill Timmons, both were made deathly ill by a natural medicine doctor that tried to detox them aggressively before they were ready. So both Timmons and Leibowitz, they just drilled that into me literally from day one. You do not make this mistake, kid. This is how I got sick. This is what almost killed me. Don't pull out mold. Don't pull out heavy metals until the body's ready for it. So I never made that mistake just because there's two guys yelling at me for like 6 or 7 years not to make that mistake, but you see it a lot. And then I would extend that mistake out to Timmons to say, don't treat the GI first. Don't do it. It's tempting. You can't go after Giardia on day one. The reason they have the Giardia is because their diet's crappy and they're stressed out of their mind. You got to deal with that underlying cause for the first few months. Get that dialed in, and then your ability to get rid of the Giardia will be so enhanced. So be patient and do things in the right sequence, okay? Let's see, favorite mitochondrial supplement. So everything we do for mitochondria is based on the lab markers. So we look at beta oxidation, glycolysis, the citric acid cycle, oxidative stress, magnesium levels. So all the mitochondrial programs I design or help you all learn how to do are based on organic acids testing. So I don't have a favorite, it's just whatever the lab shows. Oh, here's a good question. Should butyrate be avoided with dysbiosis? No, not at all. You could do butyrate for everybody on day one. You could even do butyrate in that first 2 months when you're working to strengthen the system, totally fine. You could do butyrate from day one with anybody. There's no downside to that ever. Let's see here. We got 1 or 2 more questions and we got to wrap it up. Leaky gut question. How do you manage a patient on PPIs? That depends, but most everybody on a PPI, you should be able to get them off of it if you do that appropriate, if you take your time and do it right. Do you wait, and this is an important question from Amanda here. Do you wait until you've worked on the adrenals to even run a stool test? No, I think it's very important to run all 3 tests in the very beginning. All 3 tests in the very beginning. Adrenals and any other hormones you need, like thyroid or testosterone, estrogen, whatever. So all the GI testing you need to get done, and then organic acids, amino acids, fatty acids, all that stuff. I think it's better to get all 3 tests done in the very beginning because that gives you the complete picture of what's going on. And it's just much easier to see. You have Giardia and H. pylori, you have a really bad adrenal problem, low progesterone, you've got beta-glucuronidase on your stool test is screwed up, and you have estrogen dominance on the hormone test, and your liver's not working well on organic acids. You see that whole picture, right? You see estrogen dominance on the hormone. We had a case like this morning in class. Estrogen dominance on the hormone test, beta-glucuronidase on the GI test. That's estrogen dominance, right? But it's coming from the GI. And then liver detoxification problems with phase 2 liver detox. That's like the same problem, but you see the hormonal expression, the GI expression, and the liver expression. Then you know, oh man, this is crazy town. We had one just like this morning. I'm going to treat their liver, their GI, and their female hormones. I'm going to give them progesterone, get rid of the estrogen with the liver detox program, and get rid of the excess estrogen with the beta-glucuronidase calcium D-glucarate thing based on the GI testing. So if you do all 3 tests at the same time, you have like this multi-dimensional chess thing going on, and you can move the pieces around in a really clinically impactful way. Okay, it's a life-changing kind of way. And that's the whole point of the mentorship, is to learn how to do each of these tests, to see all that data at the same time, and then be able to make these, clever decisions about what you're actually going to do to get that person better. Okay, we're out of time now. I'm going to wrap it up. We have another one of these in a couple of days, and I hope to see some of you there as well. Okay, bye for now.